Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Lucy Rivera and I am the host of this program. This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. And today I am very excited to introduce to you Honorable Judge Ed Ginsburg, who is the founder of Senior Lawyers for Justice. Judge Ginsburg, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Your Honor, I'm very curious to know, how did you first think you wanted to be a lawyer, and how did it happen?
Well, it's interesting because of my father. My father came to this country from Kiev in the Ukraine when he was 4 years old.
Oh.
And he and his two older brothers sold newspapers at Park Street and Rose Wharf here in Boston and worked their way through law school. And by the time I came along, my father was a practicing lawyer and he enjoyed what he did every day. He used to go sometimes to 2 to 3 courts a day in those days, and he'd come home and he'd tell the stories, and it was interesting because not only did he help people, but it was a challenge. And when I went away to high school, I had an English teacher who would come into class at 8 o'clock in the morning, rubbing his hands. And he would say, I don't know if any of you students are learning anything, but I do this because I love it. So it was important to me to do something that I thought would be rewarding but also fun.
Yes.
So that's why I became a lawyer.
But you also became a judge in the probate court.
That's right.
And that's a very big accomplishment. How did that happen?
Well, I'd been a lawyer about 18 years, and I used to go to court all the time. And one day I was coming back from a court in Salem. I was coming over the Tobin Bridge, and I had the radio on. And there was an announcement by someone I'd gone to law school that they were looking for help to support a brief to hold up the new proposed court reform law.
Okay.
Now, I had been practicing law a long time, and I was coming from a court where I had been 8 times on one case, and it never got reached.
Oh.
And I was going to pull my hair out. And I said, this system really doesn't work very well. And here they were trying to reform it.
Okay.
And I called up my friend and I said, I'll help you write that brief.
Okay.
So they came to my office, I will never forget, at night, and we made up the brief, and it went into effect. The court reform was upheld, and then someone said, well, now you've got to become a part of it. You have to become a judge. And I said, well, I didn't know if I wanted to do that. And they said, oh, no, you really believe in it. I said, yes, I do. So I applied to become a judge, and I was chosen. I then called my mother, and I said, guess what's happened?
Wow.
Governor Dukakis is appointing me a judge. And my mother said, that's very nice. If your father were alive, he'd be very proud. But you're going to have to call Governor Dukakis back and say, you can't be a judge now because you've got a young family you have to support and raise. And I laughed. I said to my mother, the chance comes once. And if you don't get on the train that one time, you're not going to get it. So that's how I became a judge.
But prior to that, you want to talk about the brief that caused the reform? And
well, I just helped a little bit. What do? You had to support the reform because the people who opposed reform challenged it. They said, because, you know, lawyers don't like change. Did you know that? Lawyers resist all change.
Okay.
And so when the change came, which was very important, you had to have some people who helped support it.
Right.
I had a very small part, but I helped to
Very.
support it, yes.
And what did that reform do?
It helped to reorganize the court. Up until then, it was almost every individual court was on its own.
Oh.
And this kind of started to put the courts all under what was called a trial court. And you
Wonderful.
had departments of a trial court
Very
rather
important.
than each court being separate.
Well, it's a great accomplishment.
Well, I was just a piece of it. I wasn't my accomplishment.
Well, that's still
yeah.
a part of it. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's making you so. Have you've been practicing for over 50 years?
Oh yeah, it's a long time.
And how has it changed probate court? How has the probate business practice changed
You know,
since?
when I was a young lawyer, to get a divorce,
Okay.
you had to show fault.
Oh, okay.
That means if I went in to get a divorce against you, I would have to prove that you were guilty of cruel and abusive treatment, or adultery, or gross and confirmed habits of intoxication. And then the defense was, if I was guilty of the same thing, guess what? Neither of us could get a divorce.
Oh, wow.
And you were
Very-
locked in. You were locked. You couldn't get out. That's what it was when I first started practicing law.
Wow.
That all changed. We have now no fault divorce. And that's based on the theory that when two people don't hit it off, who knows whose fault it is? There's a famous saying, no coin is so thin it doesn't have two sides. So that's a big change. And then the main argument now is taking care of children and dividing property.
Yes.
Also, when I first became a lawyer, there were no such things as paternity cases. In order, when a child was born out of wedlock and you wanted to prove who the father was, it was a criminal case, a bastardy trial.
Oh.
Wow, you like that name?
No.
It was a criminal case, and you were entitled to a trial by jury. How did you prove it?
Yeah.
You'd say, I'm the father. I would say, I'm not the father. He says, she said. And then they take the baby and parade the baby before the jury. And the jury would look and say, well, that baby does look like him. Or that baby doesn't look like him. So he is or he is not. Now,
Oh, no.
it's a civil thing. And you know how you show whether somebody's the father or not?
How do you show?
I take a little saliva from me,
Yes.
a little saliva from you, a little saliva from the baby, and they can test it together, and they can show 99 and 44 100% if I'm the father. Big change. Isn't that a huge change?
That is wonderful, important and life-changing.
Life-changing. And you know, what used to be in the probate court, no paternity case, because they were criminal cases. Now, guess what? In some of the courts, over half the cases are paternity, not divorce cases. The people have the children and they're not married. That's
Okay.
very common now. It's a big change,
That is.
big change. So those are two. We now have the guardianships, a lot of guardianships when people can't take care of their children. The grandparents
Yes.
come in and ask.
Okay.
So those are some of the changes.
Those are really important changes, and I'm glad
Dramatic.
these changes seem
Dramatic changes.
dramatic changes, and they just seem that with technology they happened. But do you feel that maybe before it was harder to grant divorce than now? Are people less committed now, you think?
In society, are people less committed? Well, in those days when you had fault, you had to prove fault, you couldn't get a divorce, but that didn't mean that people felt happy towards each other.
Right.
They just couldn't get out. And it was mainly women who felt trapped. They couldn't get out. They felt trapped. And now that isn't. So I think it's improved in that way. You shouldn't have to show fault.
Yes.
Shouldn't have to do that.
Thank you, Your Honor. And on a happier note, what is the happiest case that you have?
You know the happiest thing? Adoptions. I used to do adoptions in the morning. And that's human nature at its best, at its very best. Two people,
Yes.
they're going to get a baby. And the baby is going to get parents. That's human nature at its best. And I used to love to do adoptions. You know what I would do when they'd come in?
What would you
If
do?
the children were old enough,
Yes.
I'd say, what if you could go out and eat any place in the world, where would you want to go? And I'd look at the parents, and I'd look at the child, and they always would say McDonald's or Burger King or something. And I'd take a court order, and I'd fill it in saying, it is hereby ordered that you take this child to McDonald's by next week.
That's great.
And then they'd take the court, and then I'd say, you have to send me back the paper saying you complied with the court order. And so the adoption process, it's wonderful. That's human nature at its very best.
That's beautiful, Judge Ginsburg. What about the most important case that you've ever had?
The hardest cases have to do with children.
Okay.
The custody of children.
Okay.
When people fight, the parents fight, and the children are caught in the middle. What's in the best interest of the children? Sometimes the parents say, I need this. You do, huh? The other parent says, I need this. And I say, what's in the best interest of the children? You can make a mistake in dividing up property. You can make a mistake in a child support order. An appellate court can fix it up. But if you mess up the children, that has effect long past the time you make the order. So the custody and the children, that's the hardest.
Those are the most difficult.
Those are the most difficult.
And the adoptions are the happiest.
Oh, yeah, they're wonderful.
Which ones are the most important?
Well, I would say the children, but if you want to know an important case, the case I had, and it shows you our society, how it has changed.
Yes.
I came out onto the court one morning, and before me were a husband and a wife getting a divorce, and they were there on a motion. The father wanted regular visitation with his two children, a boy 13 and a girl 8. And he said, I'm entitled to see these children like everybody else every other weekend and one night during the week.
Yes.
And the mother's eyes were rolling. Now, what had happened is, from the time these people filed for the divorce until they appeared before me, the father had had a sex change operation, and he, if anything, was more feminine to look at than the mother. He was a very attractive lady. And the mother was saying, well, no, you know what happened last weekend? What? Daddy, looking like you, every bit as pretty as you are, took the children to Burger King. And they were eating on a Saturday in a crowded restaurant. And the little boy said he had to go to the bathroom. So he went over to the other side of the restaurant into the bathroom. And then he came out and he's looking. And he looks over where his sister and his father, who now looks like you, sitting. He says, hey, Daddy, I'm over here. And everybody turns and looks. And they look as he goes back, the little boy goes back to the table and sits down. And Daddy, who now looks like Mommy, says, maybe when we're out in public, you shouldn't call me Daddy. You should call me Mommy number 2.
Mommy number 2.
Now that case is before me. I had never seen anything like this.
Very different.
I didn't know what to do. I remembered the doctor's oath. What's the doctor's oath? This above all, do no harm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So I said to myself, I'm not going to make any decision right now. I'm going to appoint an attorney for these children and send them down to the chief of children's psychiatry at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And when I hear back from them, I'm going to continue this case for 2 weeks, and I want to hear back, and then I'll decide.
Yes.
It came back in 2 weeks. And the head of psychiatry at the Mass General and the lawyer I appointed to represent the children said, right now, the boy, he's 13, he's in puberty, he's going through puberty. He's a little confused and upset, so he rather not see his father right now. But the 8-year-old girl, she loves him, wants to go with him. But when she gets into puberty, she may change her mind. But we'll have to wait and see. So I said, we'll do that. The case never came back to court. And about 4 years later, I ran into one of the lawyers. And I said, what happened to that case?
Yes.
And they said, the father, who was now a woman, moved to Vermont.
Okay.
She has a wonderful career as an engineer.
Oh.
And the children have a better relationship with the father, quote, than with the mother, because she's a more nurturing person.
Oh.
How do you know? So isn't that an interesting case?
Very interesting.
That's an interesting case. You never know.
And in that vein for lawyers, you appointed a lawyer in that case. Why is it important to have a lawyer?
Well, let me
case?
answer that by saying, would you ever think of going down to the Massachusetts General Hospital and saying, let me go into the operating room, you give me the tools, I'll operate on myself, and if things go wrong, I'll then yell for the doctor. You'd never think of doing that, would you?
No.
Well, if you go to court and you don't have a lawyer, aren't you operating on yourself?
Yes.
And that is not a very good idea. Now, the sad thing is that more and more people who go to court represent themselves pro se.
Yes.
Because they cannot afford lawyers. And that's sad. So I think it's very important that you find people to represent the people who cannot afford to hire a lawyer.
Yes, that's a great message and a very important message that will stay with our viewers.
That's why I started Senior Partners for Justice.
And I want to ask you that, Judge Ginsburg, you are the founder of Senior Partners for Justice.
That's right.
Tell us what it is, why you created it.
All right. As I was transitioning out from being a judge, you know,
Yes.
in this state, when you're 70 as a judge, you have to retire because you become constitutionally senile. Doesn't mean you are senile, but you're constitutionally, you have to retire. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I began to think about this about 2 years before I retired. And I said, I want to do something worthwhile. And I noticed that there were more and more people coming to court without lawyers. They couldn't afford it.
Yes.
And I thought that the system owed it to these people to provide them with a lawyer,
Yes.
if it was possible. So I started this, Senior Partners for Justice. That doesn't mean they're all old. You're a senior
Yes.
partner for justice.
Okay.
And they can run an age from just getting out of law school.
Oh.
And Yes, a lot of people just getting out, that's how they practice, they get experience. We provide them with a mentor to people in the height of their practice who want to help, because if you clear the court of the people arguing for themselves and taking up time, there's more time for their cases.
Yes.
To older people who are looking for what I call an encore, something to do before they go on to wherever we go. So I now have over 1,000 lawyers who represent the indigent in court. It's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
So that's a very big
Oh, yes.
organization.
Oh, yes.
And this, tell me more about that. Can you tell us what kind of cases do these lawyers take?
We started out mainly in the family and probate court, because that's where I came from.
Yes.
So I understand that, and I understand the problems of a family and a probate court. So I went around and I got lawyers. It was interesting. My wife said to me, when you are no longer a judge, people won't be so anxious to return your phone calls. You know, when you're a judge, people do everything for you, because you're a judge, you know. But when you're an ex-judge, they said, my wife said, I don't think that people will be that way. That was wrong. People did return the phone calls. People volunteered. People have enjoyed it, because they can do good and help at the same time. We now help in other courts. We do a lot of work in the bankruptcy court, the housing court, wherever poor people need lawyers. And I love it. Every time someone takes a case, I call them on the phone. I say, thank you for taking the case. And every time someone finishes a case, I call them on the phone and say, thank you for finishing the case. When I first started to do that, people would say, who are you kidding? You're not Judge Ginsburg. I said, yes, I am. I looked in the mirror. That's my face. It's very important to thank people. And that's very important.
And I would like to know if they're thanking you for putting this together and for allowing this to happen. I think these people are very grateful, and they
like it. Makes me feel good, you know.
Well, it's
Remember I said
great.
I became a lawyer because I saw my father did it. He was happy.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy doing this.
And they are very grateful to you for this. This is important. And tell us about probate court. What kind of cases happen
in the probate court?
Yes.
You see life in the raw. Life in the raw. You see everything from adoptions to death.
Okay.
Because when you have to probate a case, an estate, when people die, that's in the probate court. Guardianships, as I said earlier, if somebody becomes incapacitated and they need somebody to look over them, you have to go to the probate court and get somebody appointed a guardian. Divorces, paternity cases. You see the sea of human nature. All kinds of cases involving people.
Yes.
People. It's a people's court. That's really what it is. And it's better than the movies because it's real life. It's really happening.
Judge Ginsburg, thank you so much for being here with us today. We ran out of time, but I think that you have inspired us, and we are now learned about the great work that the probate court, thanks to you and the judges and the people and the senior partners for justice, people can get a lawyer out there if you can't afford it in the probate court. And Judge Ginsburg, how can people find out about this important program?
You can go online.
Okay.
Go right online. I think it's seniorpartners.org. Seniorpartnersforjustice.org. Yep, that's how you can find out about it.
Thank you, Judge Ginsburg. And thank you all of you for watching Judge Ginsburg today, founder of Senior Partners for Justice. My name is Lucy Rivera, and I'm very humble and proud to be the host of today's show. Please visit us, www.discoveringthelaw.com.
That's it.